Sarah had always loved the calm mornings in her suburban neighborhood. The stillness of the early hours, with the sun just beginning to rise, gave her a sense of peace. Today, however, would be different. She had woken up early to run some errands, the usual list of things she needed to get done. Little did she know, this simple morning routine would lead her to an encounter that would change her life. As she walked out of her house and down the driveway toward her car, she noticed something strange at the edge of her vision. Three large dogs were sitting in front of her vehicle, almost as if they were waiting for her. At first, she thought she was imagining things, but when she stopped in her tracks, the dogs didn't move. Instead, they just stared at her with wide, focused eyes. The German shepherds were all sitting in a line, with their fur glistening in the early morning sunlight. Their posture was almost regal, but their intense gaze felt unsettling, as though they had a mission, and she was somehow part of it. Sarah's first instinct was to simply walk past them. She had no reason to believe they were anything more than strays, lost and looking for food. After all, there were plenty of abandoned dogs in the area. Yet something about these three dogs felt different. They didn't act like normal strays that would scatter at the first sign of a human. Instead, they just sat there, as if they had been waiting for her. She took a hesitant step forward, watching them carefully. The largest dog, a male with a deep brown and black coat, was the first to shift. His tail twitched, but he didn't stand up. His gaze didn't leave Sarah's face for a second. The other two, a smaller female with bright eyes and a sleek coat and a younger male with a slightly nervous posture, remained silent. They didn't bark or growl, but their presence was almost overwhelming. There was no fear in their eyes, only determination, and something else Sarah couldn't quite place, a quiet desperation. For a moment, Sarah stood frozen. Was she imagining it, or did these dogs seem attached to her? She glanced down at her keys in her hand, wondering if she should just get in a car and drive away. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The dogs remained as still as statues, watching her every move. She couldn't ignore the odd sense of urgency in the air. It felt like these dogs were waiting for something, her perhaps. They didn't look lost, nor did they seem frightened, but there was a bond forming between them and her. Sarah felt a sudden pang of worry. What if they had been abandoned or worse, abused? Why were they fixated on her? A cold shiver ran down her spine, and she decided to take another step forward. She had to know what was going on. But as she got closer to the car, one of the dogs let out a low whine, its eyes never leaving hers. It was then that Sarah realized this wasn't just a random encounter. These dogs, in some way, had been waiting for her. Sarah couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. There was something about the way the three German shepherds were watching her, something more than just curiosity. It was almost as if they were expecting her to do something, but she didn't know what. She stood there for a moment, trying to assess the situation, her mind racing with questions. The largest dog, the one with the deep brown and black fur, was the most striking of the three. His eyes were intense, almost intelligent, and locked onto her as if he could read her thoughts. The other two dogs, one a sleek female with bright eyes and a glossy coat, the other a younger male with a nervous air, didn't move either. They all stared, silent and still, as if they were part of a puzzle she had yet to understand. Sarah took a step closer, her shoes crunching softly against the gravel of the driveway. She was unsure what to do. Should she call animal control? Or perhaps she should just leave them be and go about her day. But the dogs wouldn't let her. They seemed determined to keep her attention. With every step she took, they followed her, their eyes unwavering. They weren't aggressive, nor did they bark or snarl, just the opposite. Their silent presence felt almost pleading. She reached out a hand toward the largest dog, hoping he might approach her and perhaps show some sign of trust. To her surprise, he didn't flinch or pull away. In fact, he seemed to relax under her gaze. The other two dogs remained still, but their watchful eyes followed her every move. Sarah felt a strange pull toward them, as if they were waiting for her to make the next move. As her fingers brushed against the large dog's fur, she noticed how soft and thick it was, but also how strangely tense his body felt. It was as if he was holding himself back, waiting for something. Sarah paused, studying him closely. His eyes, still locked on hers, were full of something: desperation, sadness, or was it hope? A soft whine escaped from the younger male dog, and for a moment, it felt like time had slowed down. The dogs hadn't made a sound until now, and Sarah couldn't help but feel that the sound was a signal, a plea for help. The realization hit her like a wave. These dogs weren't just strays looking for food or attention. They were connected to her in some way, and she had no idea why. She took another careful step back, suddenly aware of the tension in the air. The dogs didn't approach her, but they didn't leave either. They remained rooted to the spot, almost as if they were bound to her car. No, bound to her. Her heart raced. The strange behavior of these dogs, the way they were drawn to her, was too coincidental to ignore. It wasn't just that they were in her driveway. They had been following her movements, even when she hadn't noticed. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Why were they so focused on her? What was it about her car, about her presence, that had made them act this way? Sarah glanced at the vehicle, wondering if she had missed something earlier. Had something happened that she hadn't noticed? The silence between her and the dogs was thick, almost suffocating. She could feel the weight of their gaze, each dog seeming to hold its breath, waiting for her next decision. A part of Sarah wanted to walk away, to drive off and forget this strange morning ever happened. But another part, the part that couldn't ignore the pleading look in their eyes, kept her rooted to the spot. These dogs were trying to tell her something. She just had to figure out what. Sarah's heart beat louder in her chest as she stood in front of the 3 German shepherds, still unsure of what to do next. The tension in the air was palpable, and she felt an overwhelming sense of urgency coming from the dogs. They hadn't moved, not even an inch, and yet she could feel that something important was happening, something that she couldn't quite understand. She took another cautious step toward the largest dog, the one with the deep brown and black coat. His eyes were still locked on hers, unblinking, as if he was waiting for her to make a move. She could feel the weight of the moment, but she wasn't sure what kind of move she was supposed to make. Should she try to shoo them away, or was there a reason they were here? The dogs weren't aggressive, but there was something desperate in their stillness, as if they were stuck to her car, stuck to her presence. It was then that Sarah noticed something odd. The largest dog, the one she had been focusing on, had his front paws positioned in a way that seemed intentional, almost like he was bracing himself against something. And when she looked down, she saw it. His paws were resting against the side of her car, as if he had been trying to climb up it. She blinked, confused. Why would he be doing that? Curiosity pushed Sarah forward, and she reached out again, this time brushing her fingers gently against the side of her car. As soon as she touched the metal, the youngest male dog, the one with a more nervous demeanor, let out a soft whimper, and the other 2 dogs turned toward him, their heads tilting slightly. It was as if they were all communicating silently, as though this moment had been planned, though Sarah didn't understand how. Sarah looked back at the side of her car, scanning the surface for any signs of damage. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. No visible scratches, no dents, just the usual wear and tear from driving around. But the dogs didn't seem to care about the car itself. They were more concerned with something else. Their focus had shifted, and Sarah realized they were now fixated on her, not just the car. The largest dog shifted his weight, his gaze never leaving hers, and slowly, he began to move toward the front of the vehicle. The other 2 followed suit, moving with a sense of purpose, as if they had an unspoken plan. They all seemed to be drawn to something, but what? Sarah hesitated, watching the scene unfold in front of her. The dogs weren't just sitting around aimlessly. They were clearly trying to do something, and whatever it was, it seemed to involve her. But what were they trying to communicate? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft but distinct scraping noise. Sarah looked down and saw that the dogs were now trying to get under her car, their paws reaching toward the wheel wells, their bodies low to the ground, as if they were searching for something hidden there. The sound sent a wave of panic through her. This wasn't normal dog behavior. This was something more intense. With growing concern, Sarah crouched down to get a closer look. As she did, the younger male dog let out another soft whine, a noise that seemed to tug at Sarah's heartstrings. She knelt closer, trying to figure out what was going on, when she noticed it, small strands of fur caught in the undercarriage of the car. She froze. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The dogs hadn't just appeared here by chance. They had been following her for a reason, and they weren't just drawn to her car. They were drawn to the very place where they had been abandoned. The fur was unmistakable. It was from the dogs themselves. Her mind raced. Had they been chasing her car for miles, desperately trying to catch up? She didn't know, but the evidence was right there in front of her. They had been here before, and they had been waiting for her. Sarah stood up, her heart pounding. She knew one thing for sure now. These dogs weren't random strays. They had a connection to her, a connection to her car, and to whatever had happened in the past. The question was, what were they trying to tell her? The unsettling realization that the dogs had been following her for a reason gnawed at Sarah. She stood still, processing the strange events unfolding around her. The dogs weren't just randomly drawn to her car. They were linked to something deeper, something she wasn't yet able to fully comprehend. But why? And what did they want from her? Sarah's mind raced, piecing together the fragmented clues she had noticed earlier. The fur caught under her car, the desperate look in their eyes. It all pointed to something more than just lost animals looking for food or shelter. There was a history here, a past that these dogs had somehow tied to her, and it was starting to feel like she was caught in the middle of it. She took a deep breath and decided she needed to know more. Her first instinct was to call animal control, but something told her that this wasn't an ordinary case of strays. There was more at play here, something bigger, and she had to figure it out on her own. She needed to understand what these dogs had gone through and why they had latched onto her and her car with such intensity. Sarah decided to start by talking to her neighbors. She knocked on the doors of a few houses nearby, hoping to get some answers. But each time, the responses were the same. No one knew anything about the dogs. No one had seen them before. Some neighbors even seemed uninterested, brushing her off with a quick excuse. Frustrated but not willing to give up, Sarah turned to the internet. She spent the next few hours researching anything that could explain why these dogs seemed so fixated on her car. She searched local news outlets, social media posts, and even checked with animal shelters to see if they had any information on abandoned German shepherds in the area. That's when she stumbled upon a news story from a few weeks ago. It was a local report about a dog breeder who had been caught neglecting a group of German shepherds. The breeder had been running a disreputable operation, and the dogs had been severely mistreated. According to the article, the authorities had stepped in and seized the dogs, but many of them had been left abandoned in the process, roaming the streets, trying to survive. As Sarah read through the details, a chilling thought began to form in her mind. Could these dogs be part of that very group? The timing lined up perfectly. If the dogs had been abandoned by their previous owner, they might have been wandering the area ever since, searching for something or someone who could help them. The more she read, the more the pieces started to fit together. She learned that the breeder had been reported for several counts of animal cruelty, and many of the dogs had been left to fend for themselves in harsh conditions. It seemed that the dogs had somehow found their way to Sarah's neighborhood, and her car had become their last hope. Her chest tightened as she thought about it. These poor animals hadn't just been left to wander. They had been neglected, abused, and now they were desperately clinging to anything they could find that offered them a sense of safety. It was no wonder they were so attached to her car. It had become their anchor, their sign of hope. But why had they focused on her? Was it simply a coincidence that her car had been in the right place at the right time? Or had something deeper drawn them to her specifically? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she might be the only person who could help them. The dogs had already been through so much, and now they were relying on her, whether she understood it or not. Sarah knew she couldn't just turn her back on them. She had to act. The more Sarah delved into her research, the clearer the picture became. The dogs, it seemed, weren't just wandering aimlessly. They were survivors of something far darker. The breeder's cruelty had left them scarred, both physically and emotionally. They hadn't just been abandoned. They had been cast aside like objects, left to fend for themselves in an unforgiving world. And now they were standing in front of her car, as if they knew it would offer them the one thing they had been searching for all along: safety. Sarah felt a wave of guilt wash over her. How had she not noticed sooner? How had she missed the signs of their desperation? It was almost as if these dogs had been calling out for help, and she had been too wrapped up in her own life to hear it. The guilt of ignoring them, of being unaware of their suffering, made her heart ache. But it wasn't too late. She had the information now, and she knew what she had to do. After learning about the breeder's history of animal cruelty, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that these dogs were more than just random strays. They were survivors, and they were bound to each other, bound by the shared trauma they had all endured. They had found their way to Sarah's car for a reason, and it wasn't just because it was there. It was because they were drawn to her. But why? Was it a coincidence that she, of all people, was there to offer them help? Or was something more at play? Her mind raced with possibilities. Could she be the one who could change their fate? Could she be the one who could give them a second chance? She knew she couldn't do it alone, so she decided to reach out to the local animal rescue organization. Sarah made the call, explaining the situation and the strange behavior of the dogs. She spoke about the connection they seemed to have with her, the way they had been waiting by her car, and how they had appeared to be stuck, unable to move forward without her help. The person on the other end of the line listened carefully, asking questions to ensure they understood the situation. After a brief pause, the woman on the phone reassured Sarah that they would send someone out as soon as possible to assess the situation. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The longer the dogs stayed by her car, the more attached they became to it, and to her. As Sarah hung up, she glanced out the window at the 3 German shepherds. They were still there, sitting quietly by the car, their eyes following every movement she made. The connection was undeniable. It was as if they had known she would come for them. But there was still so much uncertainty. How would they react to the rescue team? Would they trust the people who came to help them, or would they retreat into the fear and mistrust they had developed over the months of wandering alone? Sarah felt a surge of determination. She had to stay calm, to be their guide. She couldn't let them down now. They had waited for her, and she couldn't leave them in the lurch. Her heart swelled with emotion as she looked at the dogs. They had come into her life for a reason, and somehow she knew that this was the beginning of something much bigger than just a random encounter. This was the moment that would change their lives, and hers. Sarah didn't sleep much that night. She kept thinking about the dogs, the way they had looked at her with such intensity, the way they had clung to her car as if it were their last hope. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to help them, that somehow she had been chosen to give them the chance they so desperately needed. But she also knew that she had to be careful. The dogs had been through so much already, and they needed to trust her, or else the rescue attempt could turn into something more dangerous. The next morning, Sarah was up early, pacing in front of her house, keeping an eye on the driveway where the dogs had remained all night. They hadn't moved. They were still sitting there, watching her, but now there was a sense of quiet anticipation in their eyes, as if they knew what was about to happen. Her heart raced as she heard the sound of an approaching vehicle, an animal rescue van. The van pulled up slowly, and 2 people stepped out. A woman in her early 40s wearing a blue uniform with the logo of the local animal rescue service, and a younger man who looked to be in his 20s, carrying a large crate. They both looked at the dogs, their faces filled with concern and curiosity. "Are these the dogs?" the woman asked, her voice soft and calm, as if she didn't want to startle them. Sarah nodded, feeling a surge of emotion in her chest. "They've been here all night," Sarah said. "I don't know what to make of it, but they seemed stuck, like they're waiting for something. They don't seem to trust anyone else, but they've been drawn to my car. I think they've been through something terrible." The man with the crate walked slowly toward the dogs, holding out his hand in a non-threatening way. The large male dog, who had been the most dominant of the 3, watched him closely but didn't move. The woman stayed back, observing the scene carefully, ready to step in if needed. As the man got closer, the dogs didn't bark or react aggressively, but their bodies remained tense, their eyes never leaving him. Sarah held her breath, watching, praying that the dogs wouldn't retreat into fear. After a few moments, the younger male dog shifted slightly, taking a tentative step forward. The man knelt down, extending his hand further. "Hey, buddy," the man said gently. "We're here to help. We just want to make sure you're safe." The tension in the air was thick, but Sarah could see that the dogs were starting to sense that this wasn't a threat. Slowly, the largest dog, his posture still wary, took a few steps forward. The woman, sensing the shift in the dog's behavior, moved closer as well, her eyes on them, but her movements deliberate and slow. "This is good," the woman said quietly, watching as the dogs gradually relaxed. "They've been through a lot. It's going to take some time for them to trust us, but we're not here to harm them." The man stood up, his eyes meeting Sarah's. "We'll need to get them into the van, but we'll have to move slowly. If they feel cornered, they might become frightened. Let's try to get them comfortable first." Sarah nodded, feeling a sense of relief mixed with lingering anxiety. The dogs had finally allowed someone else to approach them, but there was still a long way to go. As the man carefully placed the crate on the ground, Sarah felt a deep sense of responsibility for the dogs. She had been their beacon of hope, the one they had trusted enough to come to. But now the responsibility shifted. It was no longer just about helping them survive. It was about ensuring that they would finally be able to heal. The dogs, though hesitant, allowed the rescue team to get closer. Slowly, they were guided into the van, their eyes never leaving Sarah. When the last dog, the youngest male, was safely inside the van, the woman looked at Sarah and gave her a nod. "They're in good hands now," she said softly. "But their journey isn't over. It'll take time and a lot of care, but we'll make sure they get the love they deserve." As the van pulled away, Sarah stood in her driveway, watching until it disappeared from sight. The dogs were safe. They were no longer stuck by her car, waiting for something they didn't know how to ask for. But in that moment, Sarah knew her life would never be the same. She had been part of something larger than herself, something that had brought these 3 lost souls to her doorstep. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of a new chapter for all of them. Days passed after the rescue, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unfinished. She had helped the dogs, yes, but it didn't feel like enough. They had been through so much, and while she was relieved they were no longer alone on the streets, she knew they weren't truly safe until they found a home that would give them the love and care they deserved. Sarah kept in touch with the Animal Rescue Service, calling every few days to check on their progress. The team had reported that the dogs were settling into their new environment, but it was clear they were still shaken by everything they had been through. The largest dog, who had been the most dominant, was still wary of humans, especially men. The younger male dog was a bit more trusting, but had moments of fear. And the female dog, who had been quiet but alert, was showing signs of anxiety, often pacing in her cage. It broke Sarah's heart to hear the reports. She wanted so badly to be there with them, to reassure them, but she knew they needed time to heal. She had done what she could, given them the safety they craved, but their emotional scars ran deep. One evening, Sarah received a call from the Animal Rescue Service. The woman she had spoken to before, Marissa, was on the other end of the line. "Sarah, I've got some good news," Marissa said, her voice warm. "The dogs have made significant progress. We've been working with them daily, giving them space and building trust. The large male is slowly starting to come around, and the younger dog is more responsive. We think they're ready to start looking for permanent homes." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. That's amazing. But are they really ready for adoption? I mean, given everything they've been through, will they be okay in a new home? Marissa paused, then spoke gently. "It's going to take some time, but I believe they'll adjust. They're survivors, Sarah. What you did for them, it gave them a chance. But the truth is, they still need a person they can truly trust. They've been let down so many times, and it'll take patience. But they're not beyond saving." Sarah thought for a moment. She felt a deep connection to them, a bond that had formed the moment she had seen them outside her car. She couldn't shake the feeling that they needed her in a way she had never anticipated. The thought of someone else adopting them made her feel uneasy. Would they get the love and care they truly needed? "What if I could be the one?" Sarah asked, her voice a little shaky with emotion. Marissa seemed to pause before responding. "Are you sure? It's not an easy decision, and it might take a while for them to fully trust again. But if you feel like you're ready, I'll help you through it. They already know you. They've built a bond with you. That could make a huge difference. Sarah's heart swelled with emotion. Could she really do this? Could she be the one to give them the life they deserved? The thought of becoming their permanent home filled her with a mix of excitement and nervousness. But the more she thought about it, the more certain she became. These dogs had been through too much to just let go, and they had found her for a reason. She couldn't turn her back on them now. "I'm ready," Sarah said, her voice firm with determination. "I want to be their home. I want to help them heal." Marissa's voice softened with approval. "That's wonderful, Sarah. We'll start the adoption process immediately, and I'll be there to guide you every step of the way. They're lucky to have someone like you." As the conversation ended, Sarah sat there, her mind racing. She was about to make a huge commitment, but she knew in her heart that it was the right one. The dogs had changed her life in ways she couldn't yet fully understand, and now it was her turn to give them the second chance they deserved. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of paperwork, preparations, and anticipation. Sarah was both nervous and excited, knowing that she was about to bring the dogs into her home for good. The adoption process wasn't a simple one, and Marissa had made sure Sarah was well prepared. The emotional scars the dogs carried wouldn't vanish overnight, and there would be setbacks. But Sarah was determined to provide them with the safe, loving environment they needed to heal. Finally, the day arrived. Sarah drove to the rescue center, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she fought back a wave of emotion. She had waited for this moment, and now it was here. She could barely contain the tears as she walked into the facility, where the 3 dogs were waiting. The largest male dog was the first to approach her, his tail wagging cautiously but steadily. He still had that wariness in his eyes, but the fear was fading, replaced by something that resembled trust. The younger male dog, who had once been so nervous and skittish, now looked at Sarah with a soft gaze, as if he recognized her as his protector. The female dog, though still a bit distant, took a few tentative steps forward, her body language signaling she was ready to try again. As Sarah knelt down to greet them, she felt the full weight of the responsibility she was about to take on. But she also felt something else, an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. These dogs weren't just strays anymore, they were her family. The car ride home was quiet, but there was a sense of peace in the air. The dogs sat close to her, still unsure of what was to come, but also seeming to trust the gentle rhythm of the journey. It wasn't perfect, they were still adjusting, still unsure of everything around them. But there was a glimmer of hope in their eyes. They were finally headed to the place they had been waiting for, their forever home. Over the next few months, Sarah worked hard to build the bond with each dog. The large male, whom she had started calling Max, needed time, but he slowly began to open up. The younger male, whom Sarah named Rocky, showed more signs of affection, often leaning into her when she sat on the couch. The female, Luna, took the longest to trust, but over time, she would sit beside Sarah on the porch, gazing at the sky as if she were finally beginning to feel safe. Each day was a small victory. The dogs began to play, their once cautious movements replaced by moments of joy as they ran around the yard, tails wagging. They were still wary of strangers, but with Sarah, they were beginning to show their true personalities. It wasn't easy, but Sarah knew they were healing. They were finally getting the chance to live the life they deserved. One evening, after a long walk with the dogs, Sarah sat on her porch, watching as they lay down beside her content. Max rested his head on her lap. Rocky curled up at her feet, and Luna sat next to her, her body relaxed for the first time in a long while. It was in that moment that Sarah realized something profound. These dogs had saved her just as much as she had saved them. They had entered her life at a time when she needed a purpose, and in return, they had shown her the true meaning of unconditional love. They had come from a past of pain and neglect, but together they had created something new, a family. Sarah smiled, her heart full. They had found each other for a reason, and now they were home. The journey wasn't over, but as she looked down at the dogs resting peacefully, she knew this was just the beginning of a beautiful new chapter for all of them.